Josh, I'm curious. So I wasn't able to ask this here, but this question popped into my mind later. Is there I don't know if there's an average, there's maybe not like an average, every situation obviously is different. But what can couples expect? I mean, okay, I need 6 sessions, or I need 600 sessions. I'm going to be with Josh for 10 years. I mean, can you get an idea of how you start seeing, again, every situation is going to be, I want to emphasize that, unique and different, and their path. But is there, most couples tend to start seeing this or that, or does it truly differ?
I guess in terms of the time frame for most couples, I mean, people always want to know, like, on average, how long should I be investing in this whole process? Just understanding that therapy can be expensive. That can be a barrier. Time and energy kind of spent in this whole process. I mean, typically, where I'll kind of start out most of my clients is, on a weekly basis. And then, as their needs appear, it may turn into more of like a bi-weekly or monthly thing, more as like a maintenance check. But yeah, typically, like in the beginning, couples proactively are wanting to kind of come and see me every week. And so, I'm just thinking about some of the clients that I work with. I've been meeting with some of these clients in particular for just about almost a year and a half to 2 years. But again, that's kind of like on and off, and it kind of just depends on each couple's needs at that particular time. The ones who I would say really, really come prepared, and not necessarily with like a journal and pen. Some do, but those who really take the assignments and the things that I'm telling them and integrating into their lives, being able to kind of practice these kinds of conversations outside of session, I tend to see those clients progress fairly quickly as compared to those that, just come and save it and bottle everything up for the session, where that may be more indicative of earlier sessions. I don't really feel safe talking about this stuff with you without a professional here, a mediator. But, eventually the goal, at least from my end, is being able to kind of integrate that more into their home lives to the point where they're like, feel like there's still obviously things to work on, and we have the tools and we have the experience practicing that at home.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Helpful, I think, for our listener. And another one, Rex. Sorry, Rex. I'm still in Rex's thunder here, but I'm curious. I was in a car full of people, right? We're going to a meeting, not any family members or anyone, but colleagues and things. And one of the passengers said, you know what? And she's kind of in this dating game. She said, I felt was kind of not giving up. She didn't say giving up on men, but like her roommate, just dating somebody and says, yep, view pornography, struggle working out, not getting help or things. Another one, people that she's dated, she's almost to the point where she's like, I've just almost resigned myself to the fact that every man views pornography, and I will have to get over that or get used to that or go through that, because I don't know anyone that hasn't viewed pornography. And I didn't know how to, because I don't know the stats on that, but I had to, push back a little bit. I was like, man, I've never sought out pornography. Have I seen things yet? Yes, probably. Social media and things will come, but there's a difference, I think, than seeking that out than, then all of a sudden you're exposed or something pops up. Any kind of, I don't know, helps statistics on pornography viewing as far as the, how common it is. And in early ages, is from what I understand, it's like average first exposures, I don't know, 8 or 10 or 12 or something. It's pretty early, right?
Yeah, I mean, in doing my work with, my master's thesis was all about relationships where one partner struggled with porn use, and how that influences both relational and sexual outcomes in their relationship. And, I think a lot of the research did point to there is a large, vast majority. I don't have percentages, but times they would say, up to 80%, of men struggle with this, or, been exposed to pornography and maybe intentionally seek it out. Right. Yeah, I think more than anything, it's at least for that individual in that car is just kind of understanding that this behavior is more so than just a behavior. It's something that essentially has a lot of underpinnings and a lot of roots attached to it as to why one individual may be turning it to more versus, I was just bored and things like that. And so, I think if anything, I'm always, at least where I try to stand and lead as a therapist and setting that example is, let's develop more curiosity for how this behavior has sustained itself, and kind of more on a conscious level. Why are they turning to that? And that can unveil a lot of things about someone's life. And so I think why, and I'm just curious in nature. I think that's what got me into this field and just wanting to kind of explore more about how it operates. Why do humans do the things that they do?
I would say some of the addiction or the problem in our culture is that it's pornography really saturates the media, social media, movies, TV shows. It's billboards. You can't go anywhere without seeing cleavage or something, and it's just like a little drop, and then it sends somebody's mind off into, oh, let's go check whatever out. I liked how you mentioned. I think you said that a lot of this kind of stems from a lack of people being vulnerable with their partner about how they want to show up erotically in their relationship. Would you say, is that what you said earlier, Josh?
Uh-huh.
That's just fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of the underpinnings when it comes to, someone's porn use is just understanding that, I mean, for some people, they call it like the blast emotions, bored, lonely, angry, stressed, tired. A lot of people kind of just use it kind of day to day as something that kind of masks or numbs. Like they may have a thought, if they do view porn a lot, to say like, oh, I want to view porn, or, oh, I have this urge that, now I'm wanting to satisfy. And so for many people, they may perhaps maybe lack that awareness of why they're doing the things that they do. Kind of just like that stimulus and that response, right? In Viktor Frankl's book, between stimulus and response, there's space to act, and according to your freedom and agency. But it's just the idea that, I think many people, at least as they're starting out on these journeys, just lack that awareness of how does this, other than it just being something attractive, how does this play into my life to really feed into some of that engine that keeps me hooked, right? And so, but yeah, and in terms of eroticism and sex life and things like that, I mean, I think it can be challenging where one view of it is, well, you're viewing porn because you just want more sex, because you're horny, or you want more sexual gratification or pleasure in your life, and while that is partially true, there is more that needs to be explored in that area in terms of how that sustains itself.
Yeah, a lot of the blame is on a disordered appetite, right? And it sounds like you are trying to help your clients have a little more empathy to solve the problem, correct?
Because
yeah, go ahead.
Right, because using more of that empathy, right? If we're just kind of thinking about that partner who's been struggling for, and let's just take the word struggling out, but who's been involved in this kind of behavior for so many years, they may feel very, there's just a lot of negative stigma around it, and especially if they're in a relationship where their partner is saying, hey, if I ever had this partner who engaged in this behavior, then things would be over. And so that there's a lot of shame kind of wrapped around that. And so the whole idea about approaching this with empathy, not as to condone their mistakes, but rather just to understand it for what it is, can help shed more curiosity, more empathy, more understanding, and leading to better outcomes and solutions. right? The whole idea about this is we want to be able to help give people tools and this idea and experiences of this is what it means to truly be, have a sexual or being a healthy sexual being someone who's more in tune with their bodies, with, their urges, their thoughts, and having more self-control that way. But also, how can I then better show up in a relationship where I can be more vulnerable, where I can like share just the commonalities that we all experience, right? Difficulties in life that makes us human, and instead of steering away from them, instead of trying to put on this facade of who we are, rather just they accept me for who I am and I accept myself, right?
Yeah, it's difficult for people to see the addict as the victim. I'm using general terms there, but I like the idea of being a little more empathetic and saying, gosh, that has to be something difficult to struggle with. And like you said, because of the shame involved, and then people just try to hide it and they don't want to ruin the relationship, and then they don't know what to do, and they get tied up in these behaviors that are what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, just yeah. But they're so used to it. They're just like, this is how my day goes. I wake up, I do this, have breakfast, then that, like they just kind of get into this rhythm and they don't know how to break out of it. And it is kind of an addiction because there's a dopamine, there's something attached to it. And then there's a lot of, it seems like our society or our culture now is very, with all the social media we have, people are less social. They don't know how to engage with other people. Is that something you're running into?
I'd agree. I definitely agree with that. Yeah. Social media can be more disconnecting than connecting, right? And I share a lot, in the work, with clients is being able to develop a healthy relationship with their sexual part. Because there are many people, we have different views about our sexuality, either from culturally, religiously, family of origin, what we see on social media or movies, what is acceptable, what's not acceptable in terms of our sexual being. And so I think the whole idea, and I do see a pattern when working with a lot of clients, is those that view their sexual part in a more healthy, holistic, non-judgmental way, as this is just part of who I am, rather than being very quick to judge and to criticize these natural thoughts that may come into your mind, or these urges of, I have a thought to view porn, and now I'm having, this pressure that I'm experiencing in like my genitalia and all these things. And if I learn to like label all that as a bad thing, something to be avoided, something to feel shameful of, that only is going to exacerbate pressure. And so a lot of what I teach my clients is learning to be able to take that introspective look of, and doing kind of like a background history of how did your views about your sexual part come to be? And what many people find is that, oh yeah, actually back in childhood, my parents, every time they caught me viewing porn, they would take away my devices. They would take away like everything, and they bound me for 3 months and essentially tell me never do that again. That's disgusting. And they start to resonate that with themselves. So I'm a disgusting person. This part of me is disgusting and should be avoided. Right? Anyways, I don't want to get into the nuances of that, but the whole idea about it is developing a culture of viewing your sexual being as natural, as a beautiful thing, and something that you truly can work with rather than against.
Yeah. Are you running into, I think the next thing on the horizon with this is AI and AI faux relationships. Have you had clients come into that have developed relationships or reliance on AI in a pornographic or erotic way?
Yeah. So, particularly with the clientele that I meet with, as of currently, not so much, but I'm not oblivious to, the AI and the relationships, like sex robots and all sorts of things. I know a lot of that's being invented in Japan, and there is just more of a presence there, or maybe across these. I don't know. But yeah, I think the idea of it is it's perhaps I guess where the AI is kind of going is trying to create more real life connection with AI, right? Which, I think it's just too early to tell what kind of impacts that may have on the broader population. But I guess the whole idea about it, at least as of now, is that we're trying to develop stronger, healthier connection or relationships, and that may be found on social media or AI, but maybe it may not. And I think it's just maybe too early to tell. I think, as years progress, there may be more research coming out about how what are the relational outcomes with, this robot.
It's ironic that as we develop technologically, we're trying to mimic analog and real life engagement and relations and communication. I don't know why can't we just focus on let's actually really talk to people and it's
easier, takes risk, and there's vulnerability with people.
Yeah,
there's not much AI, that fear, but
and you're fashioning the AI into really yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly right. Where a lot of the AI, at least how it portrays it in movies and things, is they're compliant. They'll do anything you want. They they validate you, but can be very one-sided, and that's just what I've observed. Right. I'm not saying that there are AI out there that can work both ways, but yeah, I think it is. Just this idea that my belief is that those connections should and need to be founded in just face-to-face contact with real people, and being able to approach a lot of those barriers of that vulnerability of, history of being denied or rejected on, social dating apps, and, being able to just build more confidence in yourself, and being able to show up more fully in those relationships. And so at least that's what I got. That's my passion, right? At least where it is right now is helping people develop relationships with real people, right? With people that you can really build a life with. This is something that, is going to carry on. Certainly going to require work. But, the whole idea about it is that understanding breeds healing, that vulnerability, that safety and that connection comes out of risk. Right. And there's always a risk. There has to be that vulnerability in order to create that safety, which we all want in a relationship, but it is going to require that sense of being open.
It seems like that's why family is so important, because if you grow up and you kind of develop your sense of self and your confidence, if you are surrounded with loving parents and siblings, that you're not running off to porn or AI to get fulfillment, and understanding like rejection isn't the end all be all. It seems like too, with the apps, the dating apps, there's so much rejection that people just give up. Tired of it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you compare these days to, and again, I wasn't even born then, but like 100 years ago, like where, social media wasn't the thing, our phones weren't a thing. And, the amount of people you'd see each day was maybe like 10 or 20. As compared to on social media, we're seeing like, I'm able to follow up with like 100 of my friends on social media if I wanted to. Now, is that going to be the most conducive to connecting myself, right? Or am I going to feed into some of that FOMO or comparisons or all the other barriers that can be there on social media?
Fear of missing out, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Fear of missing out is a big thing, and can actually drive a wedge between truly feeling like that you belong.
Right? Wow, yeah. Mm-hmm. That really is it.
I've gotta jump off.
I was gonna cut it right here.
Okay, sounds good.
But
yeah,
Josh, thank you.
Man, big thing.
Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a second to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel at Utah Marriage Commission, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. Be sure to smash the like button, leave a comment, and share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and interact with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and Facebook at Stronger Marriage. So be sure to share with us which topics you loved or which guests we should have on the show next. If you want even more resources to improve your marriage or relationship connection, visit strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, e-courses, in-depth webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producer, Rex Polanis, and the team at Utah State University, and you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission.